Good morning. Even though I'm constantly telling you to prioritize your health over taste, I still like my food to taste delicious. But somehow, I tend to eat healthy food every single day. So the question is, how do I accomplish that? Take for example the fact that I haven't had chocolate, not one piece, in, I would say, 2 years. Not one piece of chocolate. And it wasn't easy. I'm not going to say that that was just like simple for me. There's a lot of really sneaky ways of keeping chocolate in your life. You could be adding it to your coffee like I was doing. Long after I stopped making replacement cookies and cakes and all the treats that I was making, I was still putting cacao powder in my coffee. I would honestly say that only stopped about 2 years ago. And not only the cacao powder, but of course, there's cacao butter that you can also put in your coffee. And it does give it a hint of chocolatiness, like a little flavor there. It's not actual chocolate flavor, but it's a hint of it. And that's something that I did. And even in fact, I was able to eat 100% chocolate. Now, I didn't do that for long because it wasn't my favorite thing. But at the end of the day, there were all these ways that I was able to keep the taste of chocolate in my meals and in my coffee and snacks. And so I was not letting go, I guess would be the right thing to say. I was, and the question is, with the fact that all of these things had minimal carb to my day. The cacao doesn't even add any, according to them. It adds none, not even a little bit. Why does it matter? Why am I talking about this? Why did I give them up? What was the reason for me with that little bit of carb to say I'm not doing that anymore? Well, it's because being healthy isn't strictly eating less than 20 grams of carbs. What you eat actually matters. Why you eat matters. And when you eat matters. And that's what I want to talk about today, because these are things that if we get them wrong, keep us stuck. We're making mistakes, and we don't understand why we're making mistakes, especially when I'm eating things that have hardly any carb in it. How is that possibly causing a problem for me? So why do we eat? Well, we're supposed to eat because we're hungry, right? Your body gave you a signal that it needs fuel, it needs building blocks. That's why we're supposed to be eating. That's the best reason, actually, to eat. To give my body what it needs to build me, fuel me. But sometimes we eat because it's time. So the clock is telling me to eat. The clock is saying, let's go, Violet, right? I see that it's noon. And the truth is, I feel hungry when that happens. We're slaves to the clock. And we don't even realize we are. We just think this is normal. You wake up in the morning and you look at the time, and somehow the time, I noticed it the most at lunch, though, I have to be honest. When I was going to work at the office, noon would roll around and all of a sudden I'd be starving. But if I didn't know what time it was, I could make it till 1:30 not being hungry. But if I knew noon had rolled around, oh my goodness, it's time for lunch and I'm so hungry. How is it possible? How is it possible that when I don't know the time, I wasn't so hungry, right? Now, the thing is that clock thing happens also because everyone else is eating, right? And we see them pulling out their lunch boxes, and it triggers us to think about, oh, it's time to eat, right? We learn this from very young too, because we're taught this in school. Our children are in that scenario every single day, where a teacher or some kind of educator is telling them that it's time to eat, not their internal body letting them know that they're hungry. And I'm putting forward to you today, that is a huge mistake we are making. Does it keep things organized for the teachers? Yes, it does. Does it keep things organized for the kids because they all eat together and then they get to play together and then they get to educate? Yes, it does. Is that the best thing for their health? No, because we're disconnecting that process that my body would have told me, Violet, you need food. And we're giving it over to some other person who doesn't know what I had for breakfast this morning. The teacher has no clue what I had for breakfast. Was it a big breakfast? Was it a small breakfast? Was it no breakfast? Maybe I need to eat around 10 and my friend over there needs to eat more like 1:30, but we're both being told we're going to eat at noon. And there's a good chance that you are part of a family. And when you're part of a family, you're in that position where you're eating at the time that your family members eat, right? Because again, we got to get breakfast on the table to get those kids off to school. We got to get lunch on the table if we have an activity this afternoon, or supper on the table when what happens in these stories when, like, what we're eating and when we're eating, it's just, are you hungry at that point in time? And it's the part that like frustrates me here is that your kids are still eating normal stuff. And chances are your spouse is still eating normal stuff. But you're in the position in front of that food where you're cooking for people who aren't eating like you. Let's say you're doing keto like I am. And at the beginning, I was cooking normal meals because Pat wasn't keto. The kids weren't keto. So I was cooking normal meals and still trying myself to eat. So there's all of this, you're supposed to eat because you're hungry. But yet, if I'm in front of this stuff that's causing me to want it, right? There's peer pressure too, because maybe Pat's having dessert. And before he was with keto like me, he's having dessert. I'm not supposed to be having dessert. Now, I could make a keto-friendly dessert. But still, there's this pressure to have a drink or eat what they're eating. Some people's spouses are actively not supportive. I'm saying some people. Pat wasn't supportive at the beginning. He thought I was going to get sick. He thought I was harming myself. He thought it was crazy what I was eating. The truth of the matter is that there's so many reasons to eat that are not about food, even if it's pressure from your spouse to eat something proper because you're going to pass out, right? And I'm not hungry. Now, what about when, right? And the when is more nuanced than even just, the fact that most of us are at work, right? Because of the schedule and the convenience that it brings to our employers and whatever. There's this other element of being afraid to miss a meal, right? Like when we're on that schedule, like coming from how we've been feeling about food, it's a little scary to think that maybe if I don't eat right now, I might miss my opportunity because I don't have the option. Maybe the work that I do doesn't give me the option to just eat whenever. I'm lucky. I can schedule my lunch whenever I feel like scheduling my lunch. There's a lot of people, if you're working in an environment maybe where there's chemicals, or an environment where there's, like where you're teaching, you can't just pull out a sandwich and start eating when your kids are not eating. So there are some people that are just not in the environment where they're able to eat whenever. And that's scary for a lot of people because when we're hungry, we feel so hungry. But I want you to think about something. Why do we accept that we're living in a situation where we are told when to eat? Like, your boss determines when you eat as an adult. And I don't understand why we accept this. But then at the same time, I do understand why we accept it. It's years of conditioning, right? This is just the way it is. We have been taught to follow the rules because, well, we're civilized human beings and that's what we're supposed to do, right? But more importantly, again, we go back to we have a family to take care of, and those bosses pay our salaries that allow us to take care of our families. We don't want to upset them. We need to keep this job. And so we force ourselves into these boxes that says that whether you're hungry or not, you're going to eat between this time and this time, or you just lost your opportunity for the day. And then we'd end up doing the same thing to our kids because we're trying to socialize them properly so that, well, they can fit in and make money and take care of themselves. Now, the other piece of the puzzle is that if I'm trying to take care of my family and I've just worked a long day, 9 hours, most people, at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. And so now that meal that we should be having together first of all, I just realized there's another nuance here. This idea that we have to eat all together. And we do this because we want to spend time with our families. The interesting thing there is, again, if you go back in history, the reason that we would have all eaten together would have been because it would have been maybe days since we caught something. And so, yeah, when we catch something, we would have all been hungry because we hadn't eaten in days. Is that the same thing as I ate a few hours ago and now it's supper time, so I'm going to eat again? But this is what we do, right? And we're exhausted at the end of our day, so we don't want to be, well, as the mom cooking the meal, I don't want to be in the kitchen all evening. I don't want to be chasing my kids around 3 hours after I've eaten because it's time for them to eat. All of these things impact the when we allow ourselves to eat, but in a very negative way, because it puts us on a schedule that then our body needs to adapt to. But then, like, by the time you get home, you're so tired. The kids are hungry, partially because we eat on a schedule, but partially because of cues. I'm home now. When I'm home, it's time to eat, right? Home equals hungry. So kids don't necessarily know how to tell the time, but they know the order of events and they know what happens when they get to certain places. And so, again, it's a timing cue, even if they can't read the time. And by putting our kids in that position of knowing that when I get home, it's time for me to eat, then they just automatically are looking for food. You know, when I was working, I would see people pulling out snacks. And then, so I grew up in a household where we didn't do dessert. Like, that wasn't a thing. But we did have snacks. But then we didn't even like have snacks like regularly, right? So I'm talking about while I was at home. Like, yes, my mom would have a snack in our lunchbox because that was the normal thing to do. But when we were at home in the house, we didn't snack a lot. But then I went into the work world, and wow, did it open up this thing about snacking. Because when you see people eating, you want to eat. It's the weirdest thing. But then the other thing that happens is that, well, because you see people eating, you want to eat. And then so now I started to, when I grew up, buy these things and have them in my home. I found myself that when I was bored, I would eat. And then sometimes if I was tired, so like, I need a little bit of energy, I would eat. But, I was never eating anything of substance. I was eating chocolate bars. I was eating barbecue chips. That was the only flavor I liked. It's so weird, the things that I'm so particular in the things that I junked on. Chocolate. I don't like a cookie unless there's some kind of chocolate in it. I don't like a cake unless there's some kind of chocolate in it. I don't like if there's not some kind of chocolate in the thing, I'm not interested. And then chips, barbecue, or some kind of really spicy. So like regular chips, like why would you eat? Like my brain doesn't compute. Right? Even if I'm going to do salsa, it had to be the spices. Like, so again, just like, why is my mind like that? I don't know. But all I can tell you is that when I look back on these things, it wasn't because of hunger. Because if there were cookies there that were not chocolate chip, I didn't eat them. Right? So that's not hunger. If I was hungry, I would have eaten it. And it frustrates me because I know it's something that I just learned to do. And all of this because I was around people who were snacking. So I learned that from them. And then I'm at work from 9 to 5 with only one real meal in that. So snacks are the other thing we do, right? Where it's a learned thing. But it's funny how on the weekend, I ate, well, junk, but I ate meals at the times when I was hungry. It's, again, on my weekends when I'm not paying attention to the clock because I'm not trying to see when do I get to go home. Breakfast was usually later. Lunch was usually later. And supper was usually later. However, I was snacking throughout the day. Right? I was constantly snacking because why? Because a lot of the time I was bored. So we eat a lot of things. What we eat matters. And that's the last part of this that I want to come back to. What we actually eat matters. See, for most of us, we get home, we're rushing to get supper on the table for the kids. So we put whatever in front of them we think is going to get them to eat. Pizza, pasta, whatever we know they are going to put in their mouth because we're too tired to fight with them. But then that food, taunting us. How many times have you eaten the thing you made for somebody else, knowing that your meal was the healthy meal that you should have been having? And Wellness Warrior, I want you to consider that all of this is what keeps us trapped, not attaining the goals that we're trying to attain. Because we give ourselves the excuse, oh, it was just one bite of ice cream. Doesn't matter, right? High carb foods rush through us, right? They rush through us on purpose. Our body is trying to keep us healthy. But in that rush through us, what we need to understand is, even if I eat a full meal of chicken nuggets, that breaded coating, that ketchup, all that sugary parts of that meal rushes through us. It gets quickly put away as fat. And so the end result is that all that energy that we ate isn't there anymore. We actually don't have access because our body has to put it away as fat to keep us safe. What's the answer? Right? Is it social isolation? Am I supposed to just not be around my family, my friends, my coworkers while I'm trying to figure out my food so that I can eat on plan every single solitary day? Obviously not. Right? That doesn't make any sense. But that would put us in a position, if we did that, that would put us in a position where we would need to stay away from all the places that have food. That would mean, of course, no parties. Throw those out. But what about friends' houses? Can't go there. Work events? Can't go there. I wouldn't even be able to go to a restaurant. Well, I wouldn't even be able to go grocery shopping because there's garbage food everywhere. Even if I go to the normal store to buy hardware, if I go to Home Depot, as you get to the checkout, there's chocolate bars, there's chips, there's all kinds of crap for me to eat. And guess what? What we learned today is I can't even be at home, right? I can't even be at home because the people in my house don't eat like me. Now, obviously, that's not the case. I haven't moved out and I haven't kicked my daughter out. So we still live in the same home, which means somehow we figured it out, or I figured it out, right? And if I hadn't figured it out, life would have looked really small and constrained, right? Because I would have been avoiding everything. I want you to think about something. If I'm only okay away from temptation, I'm not actually okay. So what you need to do is trust the process. Actually eat what you say you will eat when you say you will eat it. So when you are hungry. By doing that, I'm solving the internal problem. When I eat what's healthy for me for many weeks in a row, so not just once, for multiple weeks in a row, I stop having carb cravings because the amount of sugar that I'm eating comes down to a low enough level that, I'm talking keto numbers here for anybody who doesn't know that I'm a keto lifestyle advocate, I guess. Would I call myself a keto? I want people to be healthy. The healthiest thing that I've found that we can do is eat keto lifestyle. So am I keto? I guess I am. So keto, carnivore, anything in that realm, I think is your best bet to solve your health and weight issues. And when you take your 450 grams of sugar, which is what I was eating, down to 20, the amazing, marvelous thing that happens is your body stops storing so much sugar away as fat. I'm not going to say it stores none because that wouldn't be true, but it stops storing so much. And you actually have the opportunity to use the energy that you're eating. And then, the best part, tap into the energy that's on your body. If you're overweight, you have energy on your body that you could be using to fuel your day that you're not using. You're not using it because you keep overeating carbohydrates. Now, for those of you who've already began your keto lifestyle, for those of you who already eat pretty healthy most of the time, I want to point out that it is actually possible to overeat healthy food. You just need to eat more carbohydrate than your body can manage, and it will start storing again. So I want to say that out loud because I think that a lot of times we think, as long as I'm eating keto-approved foods, there's nothing for me to worry about. This is why I tell people to track. Unless you're tracking, you don't truly know that you're at 20 grams or less. So that's important. But this is introducing us to another problem that I want to talk about, because if I'm going to eat when I'm hungry, what if our work world does not allow us to eat when we get hungry? What if when I would be hungry would not be the time that I would be able to eat? Which goes back to I'm afraid to miss a meal, and so therefore I eat preemptively. And the solution to this is, again, trust the process. If you wake up and realize that you aren't actually hungry, rather than force yourself to eat, right? I'm going to force down breakfast because of schedule, allow yourself to wait. Now, is it possible that by the time that you get hungry, you will be in the middle of some part of your workday where you are not able to eat. That is a possibility. I still want you to trust the process, because everyone who's trusted this process realizes that your body gives you some energy. Your body will actually, after giving you the hunger signal for a few moments, maybe 5 minutes, it kind of subsides. Did you know that it would subside? Most of us who live in that high carb world do not realize that it will subside, but it does. And once it subsides, it subsided because your body just decided to take some energy off you. Now, if we're used to eating high carb all the time, what happens is that our body isn't used to jumping back in and taking some fat for energy and for building blocks and for whatever. But if I trust the process, it took me about 3-4 days for my body to start coming and taking the energy from me. I mean, honestly, basically after a little bit of discomfort over the course of a weekend, if you start on Thursday through the weekend, you'd be back to, your body would kind of know what to do. It'd be in that process of like, oh, that's what I need to do. Now, you would, luckily though, I mean, most people have breaks during their day. So even if I can't, so I skipped breakfast. I'm working. Lunchtime is all the way down there, but if I have a morning break, then I just eat something at my morning break. Now, if I'm going to eat something at my morning break, that means I need to plan for that possibility. I need to plan for the possibility that, okay, I'm not hungry, it's breakfast, but at some point in this morning, I might actually get hungry. And then what will I do? So I bring breakfast with me, right? And I'm going to bring the easiest possible breakfast I can bring, because I don't want my life to be disrupted, and I still want to have my break, right? So I would have brought, if I was doing this, I would have brought eggs. Now, I didn't need to do this because I could eat whenever I wanted to eat, right? As I work for myself. But if I was in your scenario, I would bring eggs, because I can boil some eggs, bring them with me, and if I get hungry at whatever break happens next, I eat my eggs. Now, if I don't get hungry till lunchtime, my eggs can be part of my lunch, or I could just eat my lunch and skip the egg. I have options at that point. The biggest thing I want you to understand is that, first of all, you are not going to fall apart because you don't eat the moment that you get hungry. Will it be a little bit uncomfortable? Yes. But it won't be nearly as uncomfortable as you're thinking it's going to be. Now, the other thing I'm going to say, because for the most of us, this is possible. Some of you, this is not even, I'm about to say something that's not even possible for you. But for those it's possible, I also would have a glass of water with me in that story that I didn't have breakfast if I was nervous. Because I happen to know that if I drink some water, when I get that hungry signal, if I'm finding it overly like intense, I know that's going to help me. It's not going to solve anything if I'm actually hungry, but it's going to help me. It's going to help me to feel like not too bad. If you don't have the possibility of having water, I'm trying to help you to see that it's not even necessary to have the water. Your body will take energy from you. You need to take responsibility, Wellness Warrior, for the food you eat, and then only eat what's in the meal plan. If you actually want to lose weight, if you actually want to improve your health, you need to take responsibility. So, why did I stop using cacao powder, cacao butter, dark chocolate, when it was giving me so minuscule of a carb count in my day? Well, the reason I removed them from my meal was that I was still allowing myself to eat for fun instead of eating for health, right? even if it's just 0 grams of carb from cacao butter, it's still a taste that I'm chasing that isn't giving me the healthiest version of what I could be getting. So animal fat is the healthiest fat for a human, but yet I'm chasing this plant fat because it gives me a flavor. And when that idea came to me, it really made me stop and think about what I was doing. Why am I doing that? Right? Now, I didn't know this at the time. I just stopped it because in my mind, I was like, this doesn't make sense. I know animal fats are better. I've since learned because of healing my hands. And it's like, I love looking at my hands now because every time I look at them and I don't see and I wish I had a picture to show you, but I used to have like ridiculously rough patches on my fingers and hands that I was informed would never go away because it's just because I touched cement one time without gloves and that's what caused that problem with my hands. No, it wasn't. I mean, it might have exacerbated the dry skin I was having for sure, yes. But I don't have the dry skin anymore. My hands are fine. Like all of them, like my hands are fine. I lived with that for almost 8 years. It was embarrassing. And now my hands are fine. Now, how did I heal my hands? I stopped using coconut oil in my coffee. So I was using cacao and I was doing that because flavor. And I realized that and I said, no, that's me holding on to my past, right? That's me trying to keep my history with me. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. But then I was like, I don't even remember what happened. I think I just for a few months, like a month or so, I switched from coconut oil in my coffee to ghee, I believe it was, for, again, just to change the flavor. And when I changed to ghee, after about 2 or 3 weeks, my hands were getting better. And I didn't link it right away because, trying to figure out what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? And then the ghee finished and I went back to coconut oil and it came back. And I had a chat with Pat and I'm like, do you think? And we talked about it and it was like, well, I'll try it again. And I went back to, that time I switched to butter because I didn't have any ghee in the house. And it went away again. And that's the reason that I've stopped using coconut oil to fry with. Even though I know there's a lot of people that have no issue with coconut oil. But for some reason for me, I cannot manage it. Now, I want you to understand that I saw that it was an extra fat that was added to my diet that was from a plant source. So back then when I put down cacao butter, it wasn't giving me the optimal nutrition. That's what I was thinking about, the optimal nutrition. And I was much happier. Well, much happier. I was just as happy putting butter in my coffee as I was putting cacao butter in my coffee. And as soon as I really committed to eating for health, that no longer made the cacao butter. No, that's why I still have some of those things because they're just sitting in my cupboard. And so once in a while I use them for pictures, but it didn't make sense. I didn't see the health benefit. I hated being in pain. I lived 23 years of my life just in constant pain. Started with my knees, eventually my back, and then I think elbow was next, then shoulders. Neck was like when my daughter was like 2 to 4 was such a struggle. And finally my hip when I was 46. So from 23 to 46, 23-ish, maybe it's longer than 23 years, I lived incredible amounts of pain that I didn't need to. The part that frustrates me is I didn't need to live it. I lived it because I didn't know better. I hated being fat. I'll be honest with you. That wasn't fun for me. I lived that because I didn't know how to solve it. And then to be 3 years into, 3 years into my keto lifestyle and still allowing myself to eat for fun? No, I had to change that. It didn't make sense to me. I looked at what I was doing and I looked at myself and I said, okay, this is something that we need to address because it's not giving you anything of help. Wellness warrior, it's a slippery slope. And I need you to understand that. Because once you start to let yourself, oh, I'm just going to do this. Oh, it's just one time. Oh, but it doesn't matter. These things absolutely matter. And we don't realize what a huge impact it's having. But I can tell you, for example, when I was still making cookies that were keto friendly, when I was still making cakes that were keto friendly, what was making them taste right was the stevia that I was putting in that made them a little bit sweet, that made them taste right. Without the stevia, they didn't taste right. Right? I needed some kind of sweetener. Whether you use stevia, monk fruit, it doesn't matter what the sweetener is. My point is, erythritol, whichever one. My point is that when you eat sweet tasting things, what ends up happening is that your body reacts as if you've eaten something sweet to begin. Like, your body doesn't know the difference between real sweet and fake sweet, wellness warrior. And so you feel yourself chasing. And back then, before I made that adjustment, every once in a while when I would eat sweet things, I would feel myself chasing. Right? That's why I didn't do it very often, like 3 years ago. That's why it came down to being these few little things that I was putting in my coffee to have that little bit of, right? Now, I wasn't adding stevia to my coffee. So it was really just a hint of chocolate flavor that was still there, right? That was the last thing I was allowing myself. But that slippery slope, right? It still allowed me when a birthday was coming, it was still allowing me to think about, oh, maybe I should make a keto-friendly cake for Pat and I, which 2 years ago when I eliminated that, it was when I eliminated making keto treats altogether. We don't make them anymore. And why? Because Pat would rather have a really huge steak and I would rather eat a really juicy pork chop than eat a cake, right? My treat is actually the meal, right? Once you address the excuses that you're giving yourself, you really start to see all the places where you're still letting the foolishness in, right? Where you're still eating wrong and why you might still be struggling. And I'm not in any way trying to say that I'm like done, right? Because I feel like I still have so much more to learn. Every day I'm learning new things. But I will say that by removing all the chocolate from my diet and removing the desserts and removing all the stuff that was that chocolate related, I feel better. And I don't chase. I don't chase anything. Like, those changes had a profound impact on what I find delicious today. Because I'm not thinking chocolate delicious, believe it or not, avocado delicious is where my brain goes. Right? Because I'm not thinking barbecue chips delicious, right? I actually enjoy my meals so much more. Because my mouth isn't trained on sweet anymore. My mouth is trained on what I eat. And what I eat tastes delicious to me so if I'm eating these things, then they will taste good to me because that's what I'm eating. And your body wants you to eat. Things taste delicious to us because our body's trying to get us to do more of. So we feel good when we do certain things, so our body wants to do it again. If the foods I'm eating taste delicious, then I will eat more of them. And that gives my body what it needs. Your body wants you to give it building blocks. Your body wants it to give it fuel, right? And we can trick it by giving it these other flavors that are so overwhelming, but I know I'm all over the place right now, but I have to say this. When my daughter was 0 to 6, she didn't like sweet, right? I allowed sweet into her life when she was 4. So from 4 to 6, she had access to candy. Well, she always had access to fruit because I didn't know better back then. But I'm talking about candy and cookies and chocolate and like chocolate milk and all the fun thing. She only got access at 4 years old. And from 4 to 6, she rejected it. And even from 0 to 4, she loved cucumbers. She loved rice, but she hated like fruit. Even though the hurdles I went through, I was buying kiwis and strawberries and like all the sweet tasting fruit, right? Because she didn't like apples and she didn't like anything that tasted, well, to my mouth at that time, back then, bland-ish, she loved. And everything that tasted like sweet-ish, she didn't like, right? She would go through cucumbers like crazy. It was interesting to me. But at this stage of the game, what I'm realizing is that we don't actually like sweet. We've been made to like sweet. We have it so much that we don't realize that that dopamine hit that we're getting from eating sweet compels us to eat it. Not that we love it the way that we think we do. We tell ourselves we love it. But it's an addiction that we have. And so because I've changed the way I'm eating, the things that make me happy to eat now are on the flavors that I'm trained towards that are not so sweet. So Wellness Warrior, if you want to consistently eat healthy so that you can lose weight, so that you can live an amazing life in a healthy body that feels good, that you can do your activities, you need to do what is best for your health. And what's best for your health isn't typically what's easy, right? What's best for your health is what's best for you, what's best for your body. There's no doubt that I believe that keto is the healthiest way to solve metabolic damage and lose weight. And I lump carnivore as a subset of keto, in my opinion, right? Because you're in a ketogenic state when you eat carnivore. Whichever way you decide to go isn't the point. The point is get those carbohydrates down low enough so that you are in a ketogenic state. And your body is going to reward you by, first of all, using the extra fat that's sitting on you that you don't need to be there, but also repairing your body because when you eat healthy, you don't need to be eating as often. And eventually your body has some time to repair itself because it needs time to do that. And it can't do that if you're always eating. Now, if you want to do keto and stick to it, there's a playlist in the description and it will be linked in the cards at the end of this video when I'm done. That's going to help you with the mindset to stick to your healthy keto way of eating. If you want to join the Wellness Squad so we can continue these conversations more frequently, you can go to wellnesssquad.org and joining is free. So I look forward to talking to you over there. We can have a more in-depth conversation. Taking a little break to just replenish myself and have some time with the kids before they go back to school. So I will talk to you in a week and a half. Talk to you soon.